That's it. Yeah, I will make a double check that everything is working fine with the stream as well, and then we can actually start the interview itself. I'll make a double check that everything is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then we can actually start the interview itself. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then. Okay, perfect. There's no lag. There's no echo. Okay. Let me sit into my original position, as I'm always saying. And let us know, ladies and gentlemen, let us know if we can start. I will adjust my microphone here a bit. Hopefully I haven't messed up anything with adjustments. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Haven't messed up. Okay, let us know, ladies and gentlemen, if we can start. Let us know. Let us know. Hölgyek, urak, hogyha kezdhetünk, szóljatok nyugodtan. Let us know if we can start. I will double check again, as I always do, and then we can actually start the interview itself. Okay, actually start the interview. It seems it's working. Everything is working fine. Okay, Jack, let me know. Please let me know if you're down to start. Let me know.
Yeah, I'm ready if you are, man. Yeah,
nice. Okay, so welcome everyone in the very new episode of my Dev Live show. Today I'm joined with Jack Chapman. I would like to say that I'm very thankful and very honored that you joined us for today's episode. And like I'm always saying, let's start with a little bit of introduction. So please introduce yourself for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's awesome.
Thank you.
But yeah, like you mentioned, I'm Jack. I'm a level designer in the industry. Been in the industry now very close to 10 years, I think. I think it's like 10 years next year. So, that's considered like a bit of a veteran by this stage now, which is a weird thing in our industry. But yeah, in that time, I've worked at a bunch of different studios. I'm based in the UK, so worked at TT Games, who are kind of famous for their work on Lego titles. I had a very brief stint at Supermassive on the first Dark Pictures project, which was a lot of fun. Did a bit more time at TT after that, kind of went down, helped work on Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, which is their kind of really big, ambitious, all 9 mainline Star Wars movies in one video game, which is really, really cool, like one of the favorite projects I've worked on. And then after that, I went to Sumo Digital for a very short time, I think it was about 7 months. And I was on a project there that unfortunately got cancelled, so I ended up looking for opportunities elsewhere, which I then landed at PlayStation London studio, and I was there for about 2 years. So I left it would have been just about this time last year, if not a little bit earlier. I left there, and unfortunately that's just before the studio shut down, which is something I'm sure we can probably maybe, don't know if we'll get into too much, but I'm sure we can skirt around the topic a little bit. And then up until modern day, where I'm based at All Digital as their principal level designer, working on a new project there.
I see. Thank you for that. So my very first question would be, what was your very first contact with video games as a player? So not as a developer, but as a player, if you remember those times.
I do. Yeah. So I think the first video games I remember playing were my dad came home with a copy of the original Wolfenstein on a floppy disk. I remember maybe not playing that, but watching him play that, and then maybe having a go and not really getting it. But I remember that quite vividly. And then my next major one I remember was my grandma inherited a SNES from, I think, the church she went to or something like that. And yeah, so me and my brother kind of got that at my grandma's, and that came with Sonic and things like that. It had the Alien 3 tie-in on it, which was a 2D alien game, but was still terrifying. And had a really good game that I'm always singing the praises of, called Ranger X, which I think is a really underrated title from that era. And then from there, it was probably the PS1, so you have Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, Spyro, Metal Gear, things like that. So I played games from a very, very young age. Like a lot of people who end up in the industry, I think is quite common, right? But I think it wasn't until I played Halo 1 for the first time. So I was only about 7 when Halo 1 came out, which I'm sure has made some of your listeners like either feel really old or really young, depending on your listeners. But yeah, like remember that was the first time I remember like playing a game and not just like enjoying it, but like generally like being like floored by it. I'm being like, oh my god, like what is this? How have they made? Even though it's not this giant open world game, because it's not, it's a fairly linear game, right? But the effort they put into making this feel so much larger, and it's got this almost like, I don't know how to describe the atmosphere in Halo other than like natural, like liminalism, I guess, because it's it feels like Earth, but it's not. It's definitely alien, but it's got
It
that.
feels
It's got
alive
that.
to us, yeah. As
Yeah,
players.
yeah, but it's got that like ancient Forerunner stuff, which like it's like a metallic brutalist type approach. So it's combining all these like really like weird things, and it makes it work and almost effortlessly, right?
True.
And I think that was the time I really fell in love with the medium. I'd say, like I said, I play games a lot, but that was the one when I like fell head over heels for it and was like somewhere in the back of my head, I was like, I want to be a part of this somehow one day, as a stupid pipe dream. But that was definitely the moment where something like changed and it clicked in me.
I see. From that point of your life when you loved playing video games and enjoying your time with video games, what was that light bulb moment in your head when you realized that, hey, I would like to work on video games as well? So not just love to play video games, but also work in the industry as well.
Yeah, so like I said, it probably was that kind of Halo 1 moment for me. I think that was definitely that time, and I was like, damn, like I want to know how this ticks, and I think like it was always there, and it did disappear a bit, and I think it definitely like I've always been like quite creative, but it's tended to, when I was younger, it tended to like be more in like terms of like art and drawing, and I was obsessed with like trying to recreate Master Chief's armor or drawing like the elites from memory and stuff like that. And I think I did all that all the way through school, and I didn't really know how to like go, well, I like making things. I like making things out of like models for my action figures and stuff like that, but how do I transform that into an actual like skill set moving forward? And I think that was something I didn't really understand, up until like the end of school, really what I wanted to do. Like I was, in the UK anyway. I don't know if it's the same now, but you kind of learn the same things as everyone else, and then you get to like your second to last year at like secondary school, and you kind of like pick like 3 options you want to specialize into. And I remember like trying to pick options that would let me essentially do creative stuff rather than academic things. So I took like media, art, and I tried to take like DT as well, but my like teachers were like, nah, you need to take more academic subjects. So I got forced to take like additional science, which to this day I still am angry about. Because I'm sure I could have like used my effort elsewhere. But yeah, and I think that was definitely like, I was trying to gear. I didn't know exactly what that skill set was gonna give me, but I knew it was aiming towards being creative in some form. And I think the kind of like secondary like prong to me being kind of or like really impressed with the first Halo game was getting into the behind the scenes documentaries of Halo 2. But specifically the run up to Halo 3 with their vidocs that Bungie used to do. That to me was like seeing, even though it was like mainly promotional material, seeing the little peek behind the curtain and how the sausage is made, like in quotation marks there, to me was that kind of moment of like, oh, like people just make games for a living. Like that is a thing people do, and it's this massive creative pursuit that takes a lot of time and effort. And a lot of collaboration and stuff like that. So I remember like all those things were kind of swirling, and like I said, I didn't have this like crazy direct plan of how to get there. I just knew if I could do creative things and channel it towards something that I liked, maybe it would work. Yeah. So it was kind of
it
like
happily worked, right? So it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, here I am like 10 years later in industry, so it's I must have done something. Yes, something's kind of gone okay for me.
True. What about your family and close friends and parents? Were they supportive, by the way, about this decision of yours that you would like to work in the video game industry? Because, like you told us before, your parents were supportive about you playing video games, right? But were they supportive about this decision that you...
I mean, it's quite like an interesting, because I've talked to people about this, even outside people who work in games, about like when you're at that age of like 16 and it's like, right, what are you doing with your life? And I think like a lot of people I knew had their parents who were like quite like determined to be like, oh, you should definitely like go to college and do these things and that, and make sure you do take these options and you'll do really well and that'll set you right for life. And my parents were definitely supportive, and they wanted to obviously want the best for me and all that stuff. But I think because my parents don't come from that type of background, like my parents didn't go to college or university or anything like that. They're like, they've just kind of worked since the age of 16 type stuff. So they didn't ever have like any kind of like advice, and I don't think they tried to be like, oh, you should definitely do that. They were like, they knew that I wasn't really interested in like academic pursuits. They knew I liked making stuff. And, when I was like 16, looking around colleges and things like that, we looked around all these colleges in the Northeast, where I'm from originally in the UK, and we must have looked around about 6 or 7 of them. And my face was just like, the entire time I was like, this is not me. I don't want to be here. And then we looked at the one last college, and it was probably the closest one to like my actual house. It was maybe like a 25-minute walk, like half an hour walk.
Sorry.
And traditionally it was like what in the UK used to be called like a tech college, so more like what's the word I'm after there, I can't think of the word after there, but like more subjects that are like kind of making people into like direct careers. So people, you might have like people studying like how to do like metalwork or hairdressing or cookery. So very like like skills that would
job-oriented skills that you can
pick up. Exactly. So like not like still academic in a certain way, but definitely more like hands-on approach, getting you into like the workforce type thing. So I didn't think that would have been a good fit for me for what I wanted. I was like, I don't think that's where I need to be either, because I kind of existed in between those. I was like trying to look for the more like artistic, designy stuff. But we looked around it anyway, and I didn't really like it. Yet again, I had the same face on as I did in all the other places. I didn't look happy. My parents were like, right, come on, like, you're not having a good time, let's just go home and like we'll figure it out. And we took a shortcut through this like area of the college which we hadn't been to, and we were kind of essentially got lost. And I literally stumbled into like a guy who was there to promote like the game development course that was getting set up.
I see.
So it's completely just like weird luck. We were leaving the college, we're going home, we took a shortcut, ended up in the wrong place, and it was like, wait, what the hell? I didn't even know there was a games course here. And I just think it was, I don't know if it's the universe working in mysterious ways, trying to use that.
I believe in that,
or just luck, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I kind of stumbled into that. So, but to answer your question, like, yeah, like my parents were always like very supportive, and that was the only time they saw me like kind of glow with like happiness at being in a college. They were like, oh, look, you look really interested in doing this. And the only one time they said anything against it was, they were like, if you do this, like, you are putting all of your eggs in one basket. And I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. I just went, I'd rather have all my eggs in one basket I care about than in several baskets I don't care about at all. True. And that was the last thing they ever like said about it or challenged it or anything like that. And then it's, that was bloody hell, that was 2010, so like 15 years ago, which is insane.
A lot of years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, by the way, for you, it is important to have a mentally supportive background in your life in order to work on something that you love?
Yeah, I think so. Like, there's those like, there's people who have like the opinion of like kind of being like a, like a starving artist, or coming from like having great trauma leads to great art and stuff. And I do think there's merit in that. But I think for equally as well, you need to have your endeavors supported, and you need to always be, like if someone's drawing, as a kid. Most adults do that as kids, but stop by the time they're, adults, right? And I think that's a crying shame that people stop just creating, even if they're not good at art, they're just doing it for the sake of doing it. And I think it's a crying shame that stops, right? So I think, like fostering that, whether you're a parent with a kid or you've got a friend who's just likes doing it, I think you should foster that stuff wherever you can.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, because you'll never know where that might lead, and it's not about them finding a way to make money from it necessarily. It's just, do they enjoy it? Could they keep doing it just for the love of doing it, right? And I think that's the dream.
That's what matters at the end of the day. Exactly. Because like you said, that you had this glowing moment that you were so happy about this opportunity, and I feel like a lot of people got into this box of knowledge and the society standards and rules where they like go to a 9-to-5 job or a job where they have to be because of the money, and they forgot to be creative. But I still believe that all of us human beings have something as a talent, right? And we could pursue it. 100%. It's just like you said, it might be that our parents doesn't support us, or it might be that our society doesn't support our dream because we have to work in order to get money and pay the bills. So
totally. Yeah, I think it's one of those things as well. Of I think it's everything that your background, your like race, your class.
It's combined.
Yeah, all of this stuff can kind of factor into into things, and I think I was reading some stuff yesterday about, there was like the Brit Awards, like the kind of music awards, and it was like going through like all the winners of that, and they all come from these like very privately educated backgrounds, and they're making all this amazing music and they're very successful, but it's kind of like it's quite like horrible to see that the main people who are like reaping in all the rewards and money in the music industry all tend to come from like very privileged backgrounds, and they come from places of having great education and probably having that support and stuff. So I think we're doing a massive disservice to people who, just because they don't have money or means or
mentorship.
Whatever, 100%. Like it's all it takes sometimes is just someone going, "Hey, nice job, keep doing it." And people can turn into kind of crazy creative careers. So
very true. And I feel like especially in European countries as mine, in Hungary too, the lack of mentorship really exists, and it shows that a lot of like very talented young adults, like they suffer in the society rules because, like I said before, they end up like in a 9-to-5 job and they cannot pursue their dreams and talents, which is very sad, like you said, and I totally agree with that, because at the end of the day you should do what makes you happy. You have one life, right?
That's
so
it, man.
money won't help at the end of the day, right? So it will help pay the bills, but
that's it. It's like being having to work to survive, that's something you got to do. But if you can't express yourself and leave your kind of mark on the world with making something, I think that's, to me anyway, that's always been my thing. If it's not necessarily about there's that like I'm going to butcher the quote, but there's that amazing quote at the end of like Metal Gear Solid 2 where it's like life isn't just about like leaving your like genes and DNA. Like it's much more than that. It's about like leaving a legacy with what you've made, what you leave behind, what people find that you made and stuff. So all for that stuff.
And we never know who will be held by those forms of art, like games, right?
Exactly.
So even if it's just one person that was held by that game, but
that's it. That's it.
True.
Totally.
True. Do you believe, by the way, in learning by yourself, something that you like, or learning by school or mentors? Speaking of education and school that we talked about.
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Well, how do I answer that? So I don't think it's like a black and white issue. I think there's pros and cons of each, right? But I can only speak from my experience, and obviously I came from like a place of being in like college first. So that was like in the UK, like college kind of happens before university.
Okay.
So I did like 2 years of like, I think the course was like creative media development. So we did like everything from like animation to like concept art to sound design stop motion animation, like 3D modeling.
There's a lot of knowledge to consume then, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think people think that when we did a games course, we just like played games for 2 years or something. It's like, no, we like learned how to like build almost every part of what you need to build a game. Like we were animating, we were making models, we were in like Unreal Engine 3 at the time, like doing stuff. So like we were doing all this crazy stuff. So to me, I look back at those 2 years very fondly still, because it was, I think our entire class was maybe, I reckon it was probably like 20 people that we had, maybe a bit more, but it never felt like that. And it felt very tight knit. And we had like really amazing tutors. And because it was college and not university, like you got like quite a lot of one-on-one time with tutors. So you'd have classes and you'd be like, right, we're going to do this today. Here's like, we're going to go learn like 3D modeling 101. You're going to learn how to model a barrel, which isn't really hard to model, right? Anyone can model it. You drag a cylinder in from the browser and you're essentially done. But we learn how to do all that, and you do it. Tutor would go around, would help you out with certain bits, would sit with you if they could. So like that side of it I really liked and was like incredibly formative for me. And I think if I didn't have that, I probably would have given up trying to learn anything to do with games, because it can be it's a technical field, and it's quite can be quite off-putting, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you get into like coding and scripting and stuff like that. So to me, it was really positive from a college point of view. I loved like learning as a kind of like collective. I would say that definitely changed at uni. So I did like game design at uni afterwards as well. And I think I kind of struggled with the uni environment, if I'm being honest. I think in my head, quite naively, I was expecting it to be like three more years of the 2 years I just did at college.
I can relate to that, by the way. I have the same feeling of my studies with the university.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, cool, we're going to be learning all this stuff.
True. And it's not about that anyway.
No, it's kind of, you go there, you do stuff, and you kind of learn to become an adult, really, and you're doing all this extra socializing and things like that. You're living probably away from your parents for the first time. And the actual education part of it was quite hands-off. Like, you'd had lectures, you might have had like some practical sessions, but the kind of learning and the doings, like the onus is all on you to do, right?
Sure.
And I think I struggled with that maybe for the first couple of years of uni, and it wasn't until like my last couple of years when I was really pulled my finger out, if I'm being honest. Then I was like, okay, like I'm gonna really nail this now. So like, I don't know, there's like two sides to it, and I don't really know which camp I sit in. Like, it's kind of a little column A, a little column B. But then, at the same time, like, there's so much good resources out there that I think nowadays you could learn like all, not all, that's a stupid thing to say, but you could learn a lot of what goes into development just if you know where to look resource wise. Like, if you want to learn level design these days, I think some of the best resources out there is on YouTube. There's so many great, like, level design YouTube, like, content creators who they've worked at, places like Arcane and stuff, and they're like, here's my design test I did to get into Arcane. And you never got that type of knowledge at my university, put it that way. Like, level design was almost like an abstract concept at uni. It was kind of like game design, art, and animation. But like, game design didn't very rarely touch on level design, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, I don't know really a great answer for that, but I think it's a little bit of a both, and I think it maybe just depends what type of learner you are. Like, maybe if you like to just game and do and kind of like, fail by, kind of learn by failing, maybe you're better off just kind of doing it yourself and making like quick scrappy games and then learning from that. Or maybe you're better in teams and you just want to focus on your little thing. I just want to do the art, or I just want to do the audio, and you can learn through that way. So I guess it kind of depends what type of developer you want to be as well, right? Like, what specialization you want to get into.
True, very true. Like you said, I could totally relate to the university part, because when I got out of high school, I could really feel the same at university, that they are giving me knowledge, but it's still like I'm not that deeply interested like I want it to be, right? So it was very weird of a feeling. Yeah,
Totally, yeah.
Okay. Was it, by the way, a very scary first step for you when you had this opportunity to work on your first video game? How it felt for you? Or no, or not at all?
Do you mean like the first job in the industry type thing? Yeah. I mean, 100%. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think the more time that's gone on, and the more people I've spoken to, especially like other level designers or just other developers, I guess, really, who like maybe a bit like less senior than I am now, who like I was like noticing quite a lot of like the same stories if we ever went out and like shared different tales when we first started in the industry, and everyone tends to have a very similar thing these days of even as a junior, like you don't really get like that nice kind of time to just like get in, like then gestate naturally. You kind of get chucked into the deep end, and it's like take some time, but here's some work to do. And it does feel like there's maybe not all the expectation isn't on you, but there's definitely like here's work to do, and obviously you're happy to be there. Yeah, cool. I'm in a game job, so I think you just like try and prove yourself. See, maybe you kind of like maybe overwork yourself a little bit, and you're just like, oh my god, I want to do all this cool stuff. And I don't think it's inherently like a bad thing entirely, but I think what that ends up doing is kind of like puts you in a place where your own expectation for yourself gets set early of how many hours you should be doing and things like that. And I think that can be quite kind of dangerous for like a young professional just starting off in the industry. And I think the reason why I kind of joked at the start about saying like, I'm almost 10 years in the industry and that is considered like a veteran now is because like, I don't know if it's changed, but like the average like time for burnout in the industry used to be like 5 to 6 years. And I think that is because of the reasons I've just said. I think that people get in, they just want to prove themselves, they get in, they've got so much passion. That might get kind of used by companies. They go, okay, cool, do all this overtime or do all this stuff. And, before you realize it, like 5 years of your life's gone by and you haven't stopped for air and you're just like, oh my God, like maybe I've skipped a project or two, but I've just been, kind of racing with the blinders on. So yeah, I think when I look back now, it was probably just excitement. But I think I look back a little bit now when I first started, and I was like, damn, like it's like all I did was I just cared about kind of proving myself and like wanting to be like, keep my job and things like that. So, but, I think it was an exciting time, and I do look back at those times quite fondly, to be honest. But yeah, it's I think, like I said, I think the more people I spoke to, most people tend to have the same story of, you kind of just get dropped in, and it's like, right, get to work. It's like, okay, let's go.
Do you think like it can be changed in the future by companies, how they handle people who they hire?
I think it can. It's really hard to say at the minute, just because of how messy, to use a weird word, the industry is right now.
True.
I don't, it's one of those things of, I think the industry always seems to go through periods of it not being a good place, and like, I think
that's also
it's always just been this case of like it's really competitive to get into, like, and that is true and it always will be true. But I think at the minute, the way the industry is like, kind of falling apart a little bit, I say a little bit, falling apart. I can imagine if you're a college or uni student who's wanting to get into it, it would be very deflating looking outside in to be like, oh my God, people in the industry can't keep the jobs. How am I going to get a junior job or whatever? So it's hard to say at the minute if it can be changed and stuff, but I think it all depends on making sure that, if you're hiring new people, it's worth your time to take your time with them and make sure they know, how to kind of do the job rather than just like giving them work and letting them crack on, because that's just going to lead to things, get prone to human error stuff going wrong.
It's a similar example of like the university example, right? That you have to take one-on-one with your students in order them to be more personal and more involved and not just rush the knowledge.
Exactly, yeah, because it doesn't, it feels like a thing at the time. It's like, well, we're building a game, like no one's got time to do like the mentoring and stuff like that, which that definitely exists to a degree, but it's almost like, well, it's worth taking that time,
True.
like that initial short term.
Yeah, because people by that case could also evolve, right? So they could evolve with their knowledge. Yeah,
and it's just you ads better off just like mentoring and shepherding like a junior, like at that time, or rather than them, not learning stuff or learning the wrong stuff and getting to like 3 years into their career and they don't know some of like the the most basic stuff that they should know as like a junior artist or a junior level designer or something like that.
They would also like make less mistakes, in my opinion, by the help of mentors.
Definitely.
More help of mentors. Yeah.
Definitely.
So far, by the way, for the process of making so many games for your with your life, what was your favorite game to work on, and what parts were your favorite?
That's a really good question.
I know it's always hard to ask the favorite.
Yeah. So I think my favorite. It's hard because I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But one of my favorite ones I worked on was a project that I worked on at TT a couple of years back now, and it was when we were kind of firing up like a research and development type thing at the studio. And it was a time where we were kind of just like we're working on a bunch of different things, and anyone could kind of pitch ideas. We'd see if it had any kind of legs to it, and we'd go and like make a prototype. And if the prototype was good, then maybe we'd spend a couple more months building it. And I reckon it was maybe only about like I reckon about 4 or 5 months of my life doing this on this particular project. But I think the reason why I can't talk about it, but can explain why it's my favorite game I've ever worked on, is because it was a really good time of working with like people who are like at the top of their game, but also from like a very like different like backgrounds and age groups. I don't know if it was just completely coincidental the way the research and development team was put together or something, but I was working with people I'd never worked with before, and people really good at what they do. That they weren't just like anyone. They were like you had to kind of apply to be a part of the team. And I think it was just working with people who were really talented at what they do, but also like were really good like communicators. And we kind of like ended up with this nice culture between us where even if you were an artist, let's say, you could have like design input, or if you were an audio designer, you could have advice on the animation and things like that. And it just became this like
perfect really synergy, we could say.
Yeah, it just became this really tight knit group when it was like anyone felt comfortable to bring anything up, in a constructive manner. And we were all really behind the project. We all liked it. And it just felt like we were generally building something that we all wanted to play, and we were excited to play like every play test. And it was like, whoa, like it was a really nice moment. And I think because all the ideas really, like the main concept kind of came from me, but all of the genuinely good ideas came from the team. It was like, here's the idea, don't really know how to get there, but let's just try making it. And then every play test, we'd do it, and they'd be like, "Oh, what if we did that, or what if we changed this to this thing instead?"
It's like cooking, right? Throwing the ingredients.
And I know like there's in like creative processes, like there can be like too many cooks for that stuff, and that can be quite negative sometimes if there's a clear vision and things like that. But I think because like the direction of it, I wasn't like ruling it with an iron fist or anything. I had like the concept, I had where I wanted us to go, and I trusted everyone else who in their own department, what they were really good at, to deliver that. And if they didn't like the gameplay, or they thought one of the pieces of the HUD on the UI was rubbish, anyone could like suggest ideas and we change it. And the team worked because it was like really rapid prototyping on research and development. Like changes would happen. Like we'd watch like people at the studio play the game, and we'd be watching it on screens and stuff, and we'd see issues popping up, and like we'd be fixing the issues like while they were playing it almost. So we'd be committing the fixes, and I'd be like, right, if everyone updates, we'll try that again. And it was just this really quick way of working, and like the project was just like getting so good in such a short like level of time. But yeah, unfortunately, it will never see the light of day. It got cancelled, unfortunately. But like I said, I can't talk about details of the game, but hopefully you can probably tell just how kind of excited I am of talking about it now, how much that meant to me in my career. And it was only like 5 months of my life, maybe, so a relatively very short time for like a game project, right? But it was like just working with amazing people, and just that level of trust was incredible.
So, thank you, by the way, for sharing this very spoiler heavy information and your story with honesty. I appreciate it.
I think I've skirted around it like successfully.
True.
I didn't really,
you did a great job with that.
Yeah.
I'm excited, but hopefully one time we will know about that something. Yeah.
There's no I don't think the Warner Brothers snipers can get me in here.
True. So one thing that I was very interested before our interview, and I would like to ask this question. So I know that LEGO Worlds had an expansion, a free or a paid DLC, like I'm not sure about it, but it was called something like a survival DLC. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah.
The DLC?
Oh, that's a deep cut. Are we going there?
Yeah.
Wow.
So can you talk about that? I'm not sure if you have been ever asked about it,
I think. Yeah, it's probably fine because it's deader than dead, and I don't think it will ever get to
I'm one of those fans who was waiting and checking out when the survival DLC will hit. And one very interesting story, by the way, about the game. Not sure that you know or not, but it was available in Hungarian, like subtitled version as well. So it was a very nice touch to the game. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so. Yeah, Survivor was an interesting one, and it was we were working on that for, it wasn't a long deal of time, but I reckon because we obviously shipped Worlds and we did a few DLCs for it, like kind of expansions, and then we definitely turned our eye to doing Survivor, and we were like the team was tiny on World. I don't know if that's ever been kind of put out to you, but the main bulk of like the design team on Worlds was like 2 people.
Okay.
Like it was like 2 people.
It's not that much.
3 people at one point, and then maybe like 5 at most. But like really, people like doing the implementation stuff of it. It was like 2 designers really. Wow. Obviously, there was loads of artists and animators and crazy stuff doing all that stuff. But from the actual getting content in and like making quests and things like that, it was like 2 people. So it was a really weird time, but yeah, we really wanted Survivor to be a thing. But yeah, I don't know why my memory is actually quite hazy. I think I've probably deleted memories of it for my own sanity, but I think it just wasn't the right fit for the studio to make at the time, and it just didn't have the budget behind it. Like I said, that the team was tiny, and I think to make it what we were like what we were like proposing for it, it would have needed like significant scope up in like team, which was just like a check that the studio couldn't write at the time. But I mean, it's quite interestingly seeing what Fortnite have done with Lego.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That it came across to me like Epic Games could like scrap out the ideas from that, right? And they exactly did the same. Like
as soon as I saw the trailer,
exactly.
I was like,
it's Lego World Survival, man. Like it's like, happening.
Wait. That's the thing we were making. True. Obviously that game fundamentally is just it's just Minecraft, really, isn't it? But it has its Lego quirks to it and stuff, and all I'll say is it was very, very similar, like to what they've ended up in that, and I was more Desert Islandy. Yeah. So I don't know if someone had cameras at TT from like Epic Games spying on us or something. But it was very similar. But I was definitely more like Desert Islandy based rather than kind of like a kind of foresty biome and stuff. But yeah, we had big plans for that with like different biomes and crafting different like costumes to get to different islands and things like that. Nice. I think in a parallel world where we managed to get that working, I think Epic would have maybe been a bit gutted that we beat them to the punch, but not in this reality, unfortunately. They win this round.
True. Thank you for your honesty again about this.
No worries.
Thank you. So what about the future LEGO games, by the way? Why fans of Lego games are not having any new games from the company? What could the causing effect be behind that? Can you talk about this a bit, or you're not allowed to talk about that?
To be honest, I don't really know, because I'm obviously I haven't been there for quite some time now. But I think the kind of investment that was put into the Skywalker Saga game was, quite a lot, and that was quite a long development for TT.
I see.
I think, if you're a fan of TT games, I think you've normally expected a new one every 18 months, 2 years tops.
True, very true.
And I think obviously that slowed quite considerably for when Star Wars was coming out. And I think that's the nature of it being, it was new technology, it was a kind of like bespoke engine.
I see.
It was a much bigger title. Features wise, everything was built from the ground up. It obviously had third person kind of shooting combat in it. It had melee, boss fights and stuff.
True.
So I think it was a much larger project, and I think with that, it's probably set internally, and this is just me speculating. I have no idea, but I'd imagine it's made people go, okay, we made a bigger game. It was, it was no walk in the park by any stretch. It was a hard project to make, but having the time to do it was, very, very different and good. Because they used to make games in, like I said, 18 months, which is not a long time to make a game. So that's a lot of hours getting worked, overtime and things like that. So if I'm being honest, and it's me just kind of speculating, it's probably just giving people the time and going, do you know what? Let's give this the time it needs to be made. We're in no rush to kind of get it out. Let's make it good. Let's make sure the devs aren't working, stupid hours to get it there. But yeah, it's one of those things. I've been at TT for years now, so it's just me. My guess is as good as yours, really.
True. One additional Lego games oriented question: do you know something about Lego 2K Goal? Because it was also in the making, and I read a lot of news about that game, but it never really came across. It had to be announced last year, and it did get announced with a small unofficial cover art, but it never really happened that they announced the official game.
No, I actually don't know anything about that. Sorry.
No, it's okay. You talked about your favorite part of working in the industry of video games. What about the most challenging part or parts for you working in the industry, or what were the most challenging projects to work on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the most challenging part of any project is, it's quite hard to get it across to people who aren't in games really. But I think to me, it's understanding that games take a long time to do, and I think you don't really get to see the magic of them until they're quite close to the end. And I think, especially when you're building new IP or something kind of from the ground up, you spend a lot of time going, are we doing the right thing here? Is what we're making, is it going to work? And I think from a level design point of view, when you're building something, so especially if you're building a sequel, it's different because it worked, or you've got all the mechanics made.
True.
You can just go and build more levels for it. Maybe you got maybe you got a grappling hook or something now in the sequel, or something
go back
crazy.
To something that you already know. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You can be cool, we know it worked. Let's do more of that, but do it better and add something to it. Where I think when you're building something from the ground up, and you're trying something maybe a little different, or it's not been quite done before, you kind of are flying semi-blind. So you're okay, we think this is right for where we expect the project to get to, but games don't end up the way they always set out to be. You can have this amazing 5,000 word game design document, you can have all these prototypes and all that stuff, but ultimately making games is a different reality to the concept of making games, right? So I think you've got to just be fluid with it, and I think that is the thing that's always quite challenging, is to kind of keep the faith with a project. And that's definitely not always been the case for me. I haven't always gone I really believe in this project. Maybe it'll come out, whatever. Sometimes you're like, yeah, you know what, like, you know, I'm not really kind of feeling this, or I'm not quite feeling the studio, or whatever. So maybe I look for other opportunities and stuff like that. And I think that's completely fine and warranted to do. But you know, games just don't really manifest themselves in a great way till the kind of like near the end. You've got all these disparate parts that everyone's working on, and now and then you'll get like a little like a nice little like sight of, oh, that was really good. Maybe we did something interesting there. And it's like cool. You get that nice moment of like, you know, maybe we're building something cool. But I think for the longest time when you're making games, you're not really aware of like the end product all the time. You're very siloed in your trench a lot. And you know, if you're an animator, you kind of just want your animation work to be really good for the time being. And if you're working in levels, you just want the levels to be really good. But if you're working in the UI, you just want all the menus and stuff to look good. And it's that drip feeding of stuff coming online and finally jigsaw piecing together. That's when it starts to really get it, and you get those moments of like, oh god, we're actually building a real game, aren't we?
True.
So yeah, it's maybe a bit of a cop out answer, but I think like every game is really tough. I don't feel like I've ever worked on a game that was like easy, like at all. Like I think everyone I've worked on has been really hard, and you know, I think before my conversation, what I said to you before about the working on the R&D project, that definitely wasn't without its challenges. It wasn't like this, you know, utopia game development era or anything, but I'd say that was the smoothest it's ever been. But we were just prototyping, really, so it wasn't true game development because we weren't playing with budgets and milestones and stuff like that. We were just like, we were almost playing,
experimenting with the fun parts.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, we don't know what it is yet, but it's fun and people like it, so like that was cool. So, you know, I think that's the kind of harsh reality of game development is you can have these grand ideas, but time's your worst enemy. You know, you've got budgets to kind of consider, milestones to hit, publishers are involved. You
got also humans with their real life issues and problems, right?
Exactly.
So you will never know what's happened. Yeah.
Exactly that. So it's, you know, it's that thing of just learning. You know, I've always said as a designer, you know, you need to like learn how to like find compromise with stuff because I think designers out of all the disciplines probably are the most precious about their work. And I think, you know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being precious, but sometimes you just got to be a bit brutal and be like, okay, we need to cut something from the game. One of those levels we're going to have to go, and you're like, oh no. And cutting a level is horrible. Like it's really tough. It's a hard call to make, but sometimes if it doesn't happen, the project won't continue. So yeah, it's just one of those things. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a cheesy answer, but yeah, I think like every game is tough and every game is challenging.
I see. Speaking of cutting out something through the process of working on video games, what was the saddest thing to cut out, or saddest moments to cut something out from your own projects that you worked on?
That's a really good question. I feel like I've got so many like things of like cancel the projects, and you know, like we mentioned already, like Survivor was my first like real big thing that I had to deal with as like a developer, because I was like, it's gonna come out, it's gonna be great, I'm really excited to work on this. And then we had that meeting one day, it's like, it's not a thing anymore. We were like, oh no. So that hurt a lot. But you know, I'm much older now. I understand the mechanics of why that was done and things like that. Yeah, like I said, that R&D game I worked on, that sucked. That really hurt to see that go, because it was really good. If the team loved it, I loved it. That really hurt. I've been quite thankful with not having too many levels cut, to be honest. I mean, sometimes your level doesn't get cut entirely, and sometimes it just gets like chopped up a bit, and you just have to go, we can't do all of that bit. We're going to have to cut the level essentially in half, and that sucks. But you know, it's kind of what I'm saying as like a more senior dev is you kind of like learn that sort of like the lay of the land a bit, and you learn to like not be as precious about it, and you've got to look holistically at the game as a thing rather than your part of it is getting killed. It's like, if we don't do this, maybe the full thing won't work or won't even come out. And it's like, well, no one wants that. Like, let's do that stuff. So yeah, it's just I think losing projects is horrible. Obviously, you know, I was part of PlayStation London. I left a month before that studio unfortunately got shut down, and you know that project that was being worked on there, I think had an absolute ton of potential. And I know, you know, if you speak to anyone who worked on that project, everyone was really in love with it. And it's a shame that no one will ever kind of see that game, to be honest. I mean, I think we were quite thankful in that we did put out like one piece of concept art, and like it's nice that we have that as a bit of a memory for it. But yeah, it's a shame that that is, you know, kind of on the cut video game graveyard, unfortunately.
I see. Speaking of the topic, by the way, that you worked on so many games for so many years, how hard or how easy for you it is to leave a project behind and start working on a new one?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think very rarely is it. I mean, at least in my experience, is it leaving a project as much as it kind of is like personal life stuff that might be happening,
Okay.
or there might be kind of issues with, you know, studio stuff that you don't maybe aren't really getting on with.
I see.
So I wouldn't say it's always to do with the project. At least in my experience, sometimes it's just been, have I made the right call? Kind of come into this opportunity, you know, maybe that isn't right for me. Sometimes it was like, do you know what, I actually miss being at another studio, so I'm going to go back to there instead. And that was mainly for more like social reasons and even like location based stuff. So yeah, I think it's not always project based. I think sometimes it's more like you said, it's more just like life behind the dev stuff.
True.
So I think it's, you know, but I think at the same time, it's one of those things of, I think the project is really good. People, you know, will obviously stick to it, and it's that thing of like having the faith in it. And if you've got a really good like leadership on the game who are like really, you know, they're doing a good job at steering the ship, I think that's always going to keep people kind of firmly footed, you know, and believing in the project.
I see. So, more personal question from me would be, I believe that all of us creators who create our own craft, they always tend to put our inner self into the craft we make. Is this statement of mine true for your work when you work on video games? And if your answer is yes, what examples could you name? Or could you bring us to the table?
Yeah, so I've got one very specific answer to this, and I think I think you are correct. Like, you know, and I think on like a high level like way of like answering it, I think every developer is different. But if I'm going to like focus on level design, let's say, I think most level designers tend to have like a way of working that's different to each other, and I think with that they might have like a little, you know, maybe something they fall back into a little bit as the way they work. And with that, they might have like a certain like flourish to the way they work. So you might be able to like look at a block out on a project and tell like, oh, that's one of so and so's levels. I can just tell. And it's one of those like weird things that like how like an average Joe wouldn't get it, but someone who kind of understands how they make levels would be like, oh, I kind of get that. So I think at a high level, like, yeah, I think that definitely exists. But I think for me, like, you know, I think people and developers, it maybe doesn't happen that much these days, I don't think. But I think like Easter eggs and stuff was always quite a fun way of getting that in. And you know, not so much professionally, but I've always tried to sneak a very specific Easter eggs from this like bit of graffiti from my hometown.
Okay.
I've always tried to sneak it in every game I've ever worked on, which I don't think most people have ever found, which is always quite fun.
We knew now, right? We know now.
Yeah. So maybe some people can dig it up and stuff. But yeah, I think that's always quite a fun way to kind of leave your mark, right? I think the kind of high level answer is like, yeah, I think, you know, people have a very specific way of working and specific way of doing things, and I think over time you maybe kind of flex that muscle more, and maybe it becomes a little, you know, maybe it becomes even like more obvious in a way that you can kind of, I can tell that's one of so and so's levels, or I definitely can tell that this is someone's like animation style or something like that.
I see. What about, by the way, your personal project that you are working on now? Could you talk us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So I've only really been. I mean, it's something I'm working on like in my spare time.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm like employed full time, so I don't really get to work on it all the time. And as you can imagine, working like 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day,
Sure.
doing games, and then being like,
then again working on games.
yeah, like it's not something that you tend to have a lot of direct like need to do after doing it for 8 hours. But like when the moment strikes me to do it, it kind of happens. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of been on and off messing around with it maybe since like May, June last year. So yeah, maybe only about 9-10 months or something like that. But yeah, it kind of started off. I was really inspired by a level designer that I know called Julian, and he made a game called Threshold quite recently.
Yeah, I talked with him in one of my episodes.
Yeah. Oh, nice, brilliant. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Julian's like a really talented level designer, and many years ago we had a conversation on the podcast me and some friends used to do. I don't think we ever aired the podcast because I think he had to get it approved when he was at Arcane.
Okay.
And I don't think I think it was in the middle of the acquisition with Microsoft.
Okay.
And I think they were very like weird about things getting said. So I don't think we ever aired the episode. But yeah, we had like a really good conversation with Julian years ago and kind of dug into what makes him tick and things like that. So like me and Julian have always had like a weird like Twitter relationship. We've always like been in each other's DMs talking about level design and projects and stuff like that. And yeah, seeing him start work on Threshold was like a thing of like, oh wow, like this guy's full-time level designer, but he's taking a crack at just making his own game, and I'm like, that's cool. And I think something that your listeners might not be aware of, or maybe you are, is quite often when you've got when you're working at a game studio, especially if you're employed by like Warner Brothers, Microsoft, Sony, your contract will actually probably stop you working on any games in your spare time. So it's kind of like a non-compete clause type thing. As it's almost like if you work on anything, it's like owned by your employer essentially, which is an entire topic that you could do an entire podcast episode on.
True.
Yeah. So that's like a bit of a thing that tends to like throttle, I think, devs from trying it.
I see.
And I think I know, obviously, when Julian, I don't think he couldn't do that when he was at Arcane, for example. But when he went to Crytek, they have a much more lenient mentality behind that. So it kind of allowed him to actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think seeing him do that, and then when I started at Auroch, where I'm at now, they have a very similar mentality to Crytek, I think, of, yeah, we actively encourage our developers to be creative and do stuff. As long as we sign it off and it's not in competition with any of our projects we're making, kind of go for it. So I think it was a mixture of those two things. And then just the will to always want to do my own game. I've always wanted to do it.
I see.
And I've worked on quite a few projects that have been like cancelled the past like 3 or 4 years. So I'm just like, I haven't shipped a game in a while. Like I feel like I need to like do something.
Now
and like
is the time, right?
Out. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, let's try doing this. And I think at the start, when I first started it, I had like, very small ambitions for what it was going to be.
I see.
And I think the more I've sat with it and started making things for it and exploring the concept more, it's kind of ballooned a lot more than I thought it would have, and it's kind of became like a beast of its own, right? Like it's still a relatively short game that I want it to be. Like it's, like, I keep using the phrase like feature film length, so like 3 hours tops probably. But it's one of those things that I've said before, like games are hard and they take time, so it's one of those things of I'll keep plugging away at it. But yeah, I mean, for listeners who aren't and they kind of know of it, it's essentially the kind of elevator pitch is like Silent Hill, but set in like the northeast of the UK. So I really wanted to make a game set in England because I don't think there's many, and the ones that are set in England tend to be quite London based or like very like Britishy landmarky, and it's like, cool, here's Buckingham Palace or here's Big Ben or something like that, and it's like, that's London. Like I want to make something that feels shows like England, what and all, like good bits, bad bits, and hopefully can just be like a like a bit of like a photograph of a place that you can like has got something weird going on with it, but hopefully you can get into it, find it somewhat compelling and a bit spooky and all that stuff that comes along with kind of atmospheric horror stuff.
I see. What was the influence, by the way, behind the story of this game that you're working on in your free time?
Yeah, so I think the kind of like the kind of maybe not much the story influence, but the kind of game influence. The main influence for it has definitely been a game called Paratopic, which probably came out probably about 10 years ago now, to be honest.
Okay.
That was always a big influence. I really liked what they did, just in terms of kind of telling a story that doesn't really. It has dialogue in the game, you have conversations and stuff, but the actual story, you've kind of got to like pay attention, and it's quite like implicit rather than explicit, and I thought that was really good. But I guess like on a kind of other side of it as well, one of my favorite films of all time is Seven, and it's not, even though it's inspired by Seven, there's no serial killer or anything like that, but I think the tone of that movie, the way it kind of looks, the way it's got this like really like deep atmosphere that you can like almost like smell. That was something I really wanted to kind of nail down with the game. And I think from what I've built so far of it, I think it's kind of hitting similar vibes. I've seen other people mention it, which is really, really cool. But I mean, like in terms of actual like inspirations for the game, there's not many story wise that I've taken influence from. It's mainly just like I said, being atmosphere that I've been trying to borrow from. So like I said, like the kind of Silent Hill franchise has obviously been incredibly influential on it because it's like cool, weird, kind of sleepy, foggy town. Yeah, sorted. Let's do that, but in England. So I'm hoping I can kind of hit that vibe. I think people have got those like comparisons straight away. Like when I put the trailer out, a few news sites kind of picked it up and they were like, "Oh, cool! It's Silent Hill but English. That's interesting." And even like a news article in Japan was like, "Oh my god, it's a Silent Hill game but set in England," and people were like, "What? This looks cool." So yeah, I think like the kind of influences is it wears its influences on its sleeve is kind of what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I'm telling I've kind of been trying to say that the story is hopefully quite quite familiar in a weird way. Like I said, I think it wears its influences on its sleeves, but does some interesting things with that.
Okay. I believe, by the way, that all creations have a deeper message in those creations itself. What would be the message of yours in this game, in this very personal game? If you could talk us about that without spoilers, of course.
Yeah, I want to be careful because I don't want
to. Exactly.
I don't want to ruin the party before it started.
True.
I think for people who I've shared it with, who are from the area it's loosely based on, they've kind of got it like quite instinctively just by seeing it. They're like, "Oh, right, okay, this looks like nostalgic," and I'm like, "Yes, like it does, doesn't it?" There's a reason for that. So, like I said, I'm borrowing, like I don't know if you're aware of like the old like Hellblazer comics, like John Constantine.
Yes.
The kind of main character is like almost like a mix-up of John Constantine, who obviously in the comics was like originally like a kind of scouse, spiritualist con man character. So I've kind of taken a lot of inspiration from that character. And there was a old TV kind of personality in the 2000s in the UK called Derek Acora.
Okay.
And he was this like a spiritualist medium guy who had his TV shows, but he was just a con man. Like he couldn't do it all, and he'd had all these TV shows like Most Haunted and things like that. And I've kind of combined those things as an idea, and I'm using that as like a base. That base of that character is going to be like very important to not only like the setting of the game, but like also the story as well of what kind of unfolds with that. But yeah, I don't want to get into too much stuff with it, but the game itself is going to be essentially, it's going to be quite light mechanically. You're not going to be kind of running around shooting zombies or anything like that. It's very much based on just kind of building an atmosphere, building up like character and story, and also it's horror, right? So I've got to kind of scare people a bit as well. So
true.
hopefully, it's I've tried to set the expectations of that quite early on. Like I'm hoping people aren't coming to it thinking that they're going to be, like grapple hooking and sliding down skyscrapers and stuff like that. It's definitely quite a methodical like experience. Like I said, I've been citing games like Paratopic for quite a while. I think, to come back to I mentioned Julian, I think the stuff he was doing on Threshold, where mechanically that game doesn't have it's not this crazy mechanically rich game. But what it does with its mechanics is really interesting, and its runtime is really short, and it tells a really compelling story that there's things to find off the beaten path, and the ending. Won't spoil the ending of Julian's game, but people who've played it till the end, there's very interesting things that game does. It leads things up to the viewer's imagination.
Sure.
So all that stuff I'm definitely interested in trying to capture. And I think I felt for a while that maybe that wasn't the direction to go with it. But I think seeing the reception to games like Mouthwashing, if you've played that at all or heard of that,
yeah.
I think seeing the reception to that game has been really, it's been good fuel on the fire for me to be like, okay, cool. Like that game's came out mechanically, very, very simple. Like it's practically a walking simulator, right? And I'm like, okay, like people like that, it's told a good story and it's told it really well. So that to me is set the bar where I that's the Everest now. So I'm like, okay, like Mouthwash is where I want to get. I'm not saying I can, but I'm gonna try.
I believe in you. So you will. Just like you said, you have to walk the path, right? That you started to walk.
Yeah, man. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the thing is, if it comes out and doesn't quite hit my own expectations or whatever, it's it's whatever. I've tried it. Do you know what I mean? So
you can also work on other games again, right? So
that's it. That's it. Yeah,
personal projects.
Exactly. I'm sure I'll learn I'll learn a whole lot from doing it. So I just didn't want to be sitting here for another, almost 10 years in industry being like, I should make my own game sometime.
Double veteran, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was like,
veteran.
Yeah. So I was like, let's just try it. And if I fail spectacularly,
no, you won't fail. You won't fail. I believe in you. Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, I could turn around and say I tried at least, and that's all that matters in life, isn't it? Really. So.
True.
Yeah.
Speaking of the release date, by the way, are you planning to release your game this year, or you are not sure about the release date yet?
Yeah. I mean, when I first started it, I would have gone, yeah, definitely. But like I said, I think the aims of it have grown. It's definitely expanded a bit what I initially wanted to do with it. And I think just the nature of the effort and time that I have at the minute to put into it is quite limited. So watch this space, I guess, for that. We'll see.
I see. Again, a more personal question would be, how have you changed, by the way, as a person in other territories of your own life from being a game developer with so many experiences for so many years? So what changes were there in your life in other territories? If there were, of course, any changes.
That's another great question. I think I think something that I've always recognised with working in games is that I've worked in obviously other jobs before I was in the industry, right? And I think even at school and different jobs, I was always aware that I didn't quite have the conversation that most people had, if that makes sense. Where when I was around people who played games or whatever, or liked kind of nerdy shit, I was like, cool, I can chat for hours and this is fine. And I think the best thing about that as being in games is all those people make games, really. So, do you know what I mean? You can kind of always, I've always felt like I'm amongst my kind of people working in games, if that makes sense. So I think, to me, I wasn't a super confident kid. I had a fairly okay time at school. I didn't excel. I didn't do bad. I was kind of just in between. I had a good gang of friends. But yeah, I think getting into games and definitely doing it professionally compared to some of the adult jobs I had beforehand was I really struggled just doing the kind of quote unquote normal jobs, and having normal conversations on a day-to-day basis, where in games, like, it's, I don't really have that. I feel like most people tend to be into the stuff you are, or they're into stuff even nerdier than you, so you're like, whoa, like, you're a nerd, I'm not a nerd now. So yeah,
I can take the
to
blame,
me, I think
right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think to me, I think it's like, it's not to say I'm a absolute like confident, Adonis or anything now, but I think it's definitely helped like bring me out of my shell a little bit, and I've made like some absolute like lifetime friends from being in the industry, and I think that is something I'll always be thankful for. Like, even if the project at the time when I met them maybe wasn't great, or maybe the project was great, or life stuff was going on, I think the one consistent thing I've always had working in games is I've always made really good friends. And I think that to me is like, that's been, worth everything, even when I'm having a bad week at work. Like, to me, I've always made really good friends, and I know like that is like a lifetime thing for that. So yeah, I'd say that's like definitely the most like positive, like personal life change for sure.
I see. Going back to the topic of, by the way, the PlayStation London game, can you also talk about that a bit to us? Are you allowed to or not?
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the only thing we can talk about is the information that was publicly out, and I think the only publicly stuff about it was co-op. It was kind of like fantasy, and that was it. And it was a PlayStation 5 game. Yeah. So yeah, I would love to talk more, but yeah, the Sony snipers are a nudge in the Warner Brothers snipers out the way to get me if I do that. So
I see. Are these games, by the way, that get cancelled in any way? Will they, or can they see the light in any day, or how many years the contracts like save these projects not to be able to show to the people what people were working on? So is it like 10 years contract, or how does it work in the industry?
It's a really fascinating subject, that I think, because like ultimately the answer is, if something's cancelled, it will never officially see the light of day unless it gets dug up and is like, right, we're rebuilding it, or we're restarting development, right? So I think the biggest example I can think of is like The Last Guardian, which was coming out for years, got cancelled / put on ice, was dead for years, and then was like, it's kind of coming back, and it actually came out, which is like a miracle, right? So I think like that is like one of the biggest like outliers. There's definitely a few big examples I'm blanking on, but I think like in an official capacity, like it's definitely rare that happens. And I think the only other way you ever find out about like cancelled games is when shit like leaks like 10-15 years later or something daft. Like, I remember like seeing like a leaked like Soul Reaver like reboot maybe about 5 years ago on the internet, and it was like, man, like that must have sucked to have that cancelled, and then it just like appeared like 5 years, and it was like, okay, cool. So I think like that tends to be the only way, and I think like people doing that are obviously playing a very dangerous game, because like, these companies are lawyered up to their gills, and I think if you leak something, it gets back to you, like they're going to come down with all the force on you. So, maybe people just find a way to do it and they don't care, or things just accidentally. I have no idea, but I think that tends to be the kind of like lay of the land, really. And like you said, it's a shame that there isn't like this almost like cataloguing of cancelled games, and it's like, well, we didn't finish the game, but let's put out some like sizzle reel work in progress stuff of it. But I think it's just IP holders protecting their property, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, is that probably these companies protect the ideas, not the games itself, but the ideas, because you might be able to reuse it by other developers or the same developers, right? So.
Yeah, I think that the most like recent example of that we've seen is obviously when Monolith made their like Shadows of Mordor games with the Nemesis system, right?
Yeah.
And when they like patented the Nemesis system, when it was like, oh, what? You've stopped like every other developer from like taking a crack at doing this system.
True.
Which, from a business point of view, totally understand why they did it, but it feels so short-sighted. True. And then now, the studio who made that, they've been shut down. True. But that patent still exists for another, I think it's like another like 9 years, 8 years. and it's like your studio's gone. Like, what are you even protecting now? Like, come on, like, just let people like have a crack at using that system, or at least like take some like learnings from it or something. But yeah, they'll just, if anyone tries to even recreate it without looking at anything under the hood, like they'll be like, no, that's our system. Like, you can't put that in your game.
It's a unique
And I think
thing,
that's like, I think that's a really, really sad state of affairs. That's like, imagine all the great games we wouldn't have got if like the original Wolfenstein or Doom was like, don't think about having a first-person shooter game. That's we're patenting in that. We'd have missed out on, you know, some of the best games ever made. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, I think it's a really short-sighted move. But I guess we'll just have to run down the clock and see whenever that expires, and hopefully everyone starts making crazy Nemesis.
We can get back to this topic of conversation with you after 10 years, right?
Yeah,
about the cancer project that you worked on, and hopefully get to know some more information.
Exactly. Exactly.
How have your perspective changed as a player now that you worked on so many games?
Yeah, I think I was talking to some friends about this recently. I think I definitely still play games. So I don't know if it's like a mixture of just being like an adult or whatever, and maybe you just don't have like the time and energy to do it as much as you did when you were younger, or how much of it is like, well, I work in games, so I don't really want to play them in my spare time. I don't know which of that is contributing more to it, but you know, I still try and play games as much as I can. I like to play, especially like indie releases. That if I'm going to play something, that tends to be where I'll really sink time into.
I see.
And then, you know, I'm not trying to throw shade at like big AAA games. I play big AAA games as well, but I think the issue with most big AAA games these days is that they take up quite a lot of your time. You know, I'd love to sit and play like Witcher 3 again, but it's going to be like 150 hours of my time, and I'm like, I could play so many good indie games in that time frame and have so many good experiences. So yeah, I think to me that's definitely like, that might be affected from working in games. Maybe that's kind of changed my opinion a little bit on stuff. But like I said, maybe that's also just being an adult and growing up a little bit. I'm not entirely sure.
I see. Okay. We talked here about a lot of topics, and I appreciate your honesty and about everything that you said. Are you down to go into some questions from my chat before I ask some other questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If I can answer them, if I can answer them, I definitely will.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let us know if there is any question. Let us know. I will read back the chat. Some comments and questions. Oh, Legus says that northern accent is so comforting. Hi from Stockport.
Oh, nice. Sick. I used to live in Stockport.
Oh, nice.
Sick. Yeah.
Okay.
Lived there for about 2 years. Yeah.
He also said that gotta check the game out. 7 is one of my favorite movies too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Please check it out. And if you like I said, it's not the same story wise, but definitely inspiration by its like visuals and its like aesthetic. So if you like the way that film looks, then yeah, definitely check it out.
And he also
when
said
it's ready, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. He also said that if you want true horror, jokes aside, don't need to go far. Just spend an average first day night in Manchester city centre.
Yeah. I've had so many jokes based on that. It's been, I saw like, because in the actual game, like the town's called Mornborough.
Oh, okay.
But I've had so many people in the UK being like, I keep reading this as like Scarborough, and like that would be scary enough. So yeah, I've heard every variation.
Inside jokes.
Yeah. I've heard every variation of English town insert here joke you've got.
And yeah, he also said that I unfortunately have to go, but fantastic interview again. Thank you. Jack seems like a genuine, down-to-earth guy. I bet he's a pleasure to work with. Best of luck with everything. Thank you
very much. We appreciate that. Yeah, nice one.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any questions? Bármilyen kérdés, hölgyek, urak? Any questions? Let us know. I will also share your personal projects Steam page in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Let me do that because I did that in my Discord, but let me do in stream chat as well. Okay, while we are waiting for questions from my chat, by the way, and before I will ask some more questions, is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation that we might have not talked about and you would like to talk about, even if it's about like games that you have worked on, your personal experiences with game development, the canceled projects, maybe that you could also talk about that I haven't asked, or anything that you would like to add?
I mean,
conversation.
I mean, I think you've really been asked some really comprehensive questions, which has been awesome. I think, I mean, I'm always cautious about never wanting to put, even though the industry is very messy at the minute, and I'm always quite cautious not to put out like a doom and gloom message. So I guess, if I was going to add one thing, really, it would be, things that really are rough at the minute, and if we're being like really brutally honest, like, it isn't great. I've got a lot of mates who are affected by layoffs. Some people still haven't found jobs. They are still struggling. And if you are, like a junior out there, or a student who's trying to get in the industry and stuff, you have my full kind of sympathies for the way things are at the minute. Like, I'd imagine it's very tough looking outside in and figuring out how the hell am I going to get into it. But I think the industry is in like a bit of a transitional stage, and I think this will die down soon. I think the industry is going to be a very different place after it, but I think it will get on its feet again. I just think it's going to be a very different industry that we've been used to seeing the past 10 years. I think we're going to see, a lot more smaller teams. We're going to see like game budgets be quite smaller. So hopefully with that, we'll see a lot of, a more like kind of closer to indie like projects coming out.
I always say that, sorry for interrupting you, I just wanted to add to this, that I always say that indie will go up on the ladder of the AAA, and AAA will fall down to the indie, and they will meet in the middle, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
You can see that a lot of indie developers make such games that are or can be considered AAA big titles,
definitely.
right? So it can always grow out. And also those people who have been laid off from AAA companies, they, like you said, they might have always had the ideas for their own very personal projects, and they can also form a team, right? So they can also form a very new developer team. So
that's it. I think it's just that thing. I think we're gonna. It'll take a bit of time. Like, it's not going to be something that happens in like 6 months to a year. It'll take a bit of time, but I generally do feel like it will get back on its feet. And I think
I agree with that.
It will be in like arguably a better place. I don't think having games with sky high budgets and stuff has been a good thing for the industry, and I think it's been a massive lesson learned. The whole live service gamble has not paid off at all, and I think it's a shame that it's taken some like catastrophic failures to prove that to these kind of like CEOs and people.
But again, it's human beings learning from mistakes, right? So it's our nature.
We can hope. Yeah, we can hope. But I mean, I would just like to say, we have lost a lot of great people from the industry the past 2.5 years. So it's hard when you're excited for a game and it doesn't come out, or a game gets delayed or cancelled or whatever. But at the heart of it, people who make games are just fucking people, man, and they just want to turn up to work and make something good and then move on. So kind of if you do know anyone who's been affected to it, try and support them, or if you know a studio who might not be doing too well, like an indie studio, maybe try and pick up some of their games that you wouldn't normally play. Try and kind of try something a bit different. It's kind of one of those things of what you mentioned as well, the kind of gap between AAA and indie, has been so big for so long. The ultimate dream scenario for me would be we get back to somewhere in the middle and we kind of create that nice AA game again. And we have maybe that returns, and we have games that only
it's like history repeats itself. It's the same for the video game industry. I can see that happening. Yeah,
definitely. But it has been a rough time. But I'm sure it will get back on its feet. But if there's any students out there, any people just trying to get into the industry, they would like any kind of a chat or anything like that can help. I can't say I'll reply straight away, but if anyone needs any advice or anything, I'll always want to kind of give back. So the offer's there.
Thank you for that. I respect that. Thank you again for your honesty. Thank you.
No worries.
How would you like to challenge yourself in the future with getting more knowledge to the table for your life? Like you mentioned before that you always loved challenging yourself in your work. What challenges would you like to take in your life within your work?
I mean, like I said, I think the big one, the most recent one is obviously just trying to start my own game and make it and ship it. But I think if I'm looking further ahead, the dream would be to set up a studio, right? But I think I'm nowhere near equipped to do that yet. And I know everyone who sets up a studio says, we weren't equipped either, we just did it.
True.
And I get that. But I feel viciously under-equipped still. So, I think to me that's definitely a goal for me at some point would be, somehow create like a really small team of people that I really like and trust and build something that we all want to make. And like I said, try and get back to that feeling that I kind of had when I was on the R&D stuff kind of those years ago, and kind of create that team of just feeling like everyone had a voice and we were all really excited, and we were building, it's a cheesy phrase to say, but kind of building the game that we want to play.
Sure.
I think is a really important thing to do. I think especially if you're setting something up for the first time, I think that is like the kind of core goal, right? If you don't enjoy playing it, then players probably aren't going to enjoy playing it. So I think to me that would be like the kind of big pipe dream for me at the minute.
I see. As a video game developer, by the way, how do you deal with players' feedback, even if it's a negative or a positive feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are always going to have opinions, right? And it's you can't do that. It's just a fact of life. So I think to me, it's I've always tried to operate when it comes to strangers, at least, of that, like don't take any advice from people you wouldn't ask for it from, type of mentality to things. So obviously that's a very easier said than done, because if someone on Steam is going, this game's rubbish and I'm getting a refund,
you will start to get depressed because of those comments.
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, it's like people are always going to like hate what you do, like even if it's great. Like some of the best games ever made are people who think it's the worst thing ever made. So you could drive yourself mad by doing that. So to me, it's you've got to try and like borrow some of that like Keanu Reeves level of calm about life when it comes to it, man. You just
Zen point,
cool. Yeah, man. You just got to go, cool. You think 3 + 3 is 17? Like, cool, man. Like, shit. Good for you. I don't care. Like, each to their own. So, yeah, I think it's you've got to try and have that mentality about stuff. And I think that's not to say you can't learn from negative feedback. Like, I think that's the best way to learn. Sometimes you do something wrong, you go, all right, I won't do that again, or I'll do that better. So there's definitely a time and a place for it. It just depends on what the kind of negative feedback is, right? And I think if we're being honest, like there's a lot of venom behind a lot of the kind of game community stuff at times, and I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of like getting into the mire with it all. And it's like sometimes just protect yourself. Don't even bother. Kind of rise into it. If you're happy with the art you've made, then stand by it. If you wish it could be better, you can do that too, right? It's not like a kind of like be all and end all one-way street thing. So
true, very true. Did you always have this mentality, by the way, or is it something that you learned?
Oh god, no!
Years?
Oh god, no! I know I'm probably coming across like this, like nothing phases
like a Zen master, right?
Yeah, I have moved past the concept of human emotion. No, like that is definitely not something I used to have, especially when I was a teenager, but even when I was first in the industry, like I struggled with that. Where now, I'll just, if you say this and I don't feel the same, I will challenge it if I feel strongly about it. But if it needs to be done ultimately, I'd be like, okay, like, cool, man. Like, you're paying me to do a job, I'll do the job, right? And I think that's the best way to operate. But it's I think it's like what I said there. I don't think there's anything wrong with challenging feedback or anything like that.
Sure.
I think that's a completely healthy thing to do. To me, like a lot of things in life, like intent is the kind of main thing for that stuff. If someone is trying to give you feedback and, you know, they've maybe misspoke a little bit, they haven't said something correctly, like, you know, work out what they're trying to say and not react to what they've said. You know, that's going to do you a lot of, like, in like for your standing amongst other people, but like mental health, I would assume so as well, because being pissed off does nothing good for you either, right? Yeah,
just cancels your time that you would projects towards.
exactly, man. Yeah, totally.
Closing question would be: what would be your would like to start their career in the who are already in developers?
Yeah, I guess I did kind of, but it's definitely tried to get in at the minute. So it's, you know, I don't want to say, you know, wouldn't be correct in the current.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think like some truths to stuff, right? So I don't know, from like a uni college background, advice I can give you is try and build, whether you're a level designer or whatever you are, like try and build as much personal projects as you can to, number one, get good, or be as good as you can be compared to your like university peers. But also like that'll generate a lot of like portfolio work. And it isn't a case of putting 100 things in your portfolio. I wouldn't recommend that. If you have lots of portfolio pieces you've done, that means you can like pick your best bits you've done from that. And the best bit of advice I'd give uni students or level designers who want to be in the industry, whatever, the kind of quote I've lived by from one of my mentors at college was, "You'll always be judged by your worst piece of work." So don't, you know, even if you've got 5 things in your portfolio, but you know deep down you could take one of them off because it's not as good, you should do that. Like, there's no point just having things on for the sake of it. Yes, it looks good, you've got more stuff on there, but if people look at that and they see something that's a bit mediocre, like that's the bit they'll probably remember. So yeah, don't be afraid to like put less stuff on there. If it's high quality stuff, like if I was looking at a portfolio, I'd be more impressed with, you know, 2 really good things rather than like 6 like mediocre bits. So and I think that can apply for like any part of game dev, to be honest. If you're an animator, I'm sure you've got, you know, loads of cool anim or walk cycles or something you've made, but you know deep down, you know, one of them isn't that good compared to the rest, so maybe just trim it off or archive it or something. But yeah, I think that's like really useful advice for anyone who's trying to get into the industry. But I mean, and like I said, I don't want to say too much with just the way things are at the minute. I don't know what opportunities exist for, you know, kind of interns or juniors at the minute, but you know, I think, you know, it's kind of what we said before, even though the industry is kind of falling apart and stuff, like there's still publishers, there's still people there who have capital, who want to fund interesting games. So even though you might not have like professional game experience, you might not have a uni degree and stuff, there's a lot of resources out there these days that you can learn how to put games together. And even if you are just making, you know, 101 Pong type stuff, you know, you do that, you go, okay, I've made Pong, I'm going to make this game next. You go from there, like you can start really putting some stuff together. You know, you might be able to like have like a really cool indie game in your hand, or maybe try and do some more like community game jam stuff if you haven't got any industry experience. It's a really good way just to kind of get in, have a mess around, see which bit of development you might like more than the others. And by the end of it, you know, you might come away with it might be a really goofy like game that you've made in like 48 hours, but you know, it's a game jam game. They don't need to be polished, right? I think the entire point of it is showing the potential, what they could be if they had like time and money put towards them. So, yeah, I think that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today and for your honesty. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and thank you
it's been
for the chat as well, conversations, and yeah. Thank you so
No
much.
worries. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation as well.
Like I said, I will need some more minutes of stream, but for those who are watching us live or will be watching back the VOD on Twitch or later on YouTube, thank you so much for joining in. And don't forget to wishlist our friends Jack's game, personal game on Steam as well. I linked it in my Discord and in my chat as well.
That'd be
thank
awesome.
you so much.
Yeah, really appreciate that plug, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.